Hey folks, it's Janek Gwizdala. It's the Janek Gwizdala podcast. Right at the top of the show here, tour dates coming up September 7th. I'll be here in Los Angeles at the Baked Potato. We haven't done the gig in a few months. Everyone's been running around and otherwise engaged. Be there with Bob Reynolds, also October 12th. I have a bunch of stuff coming up in Hong Kong and Shanghai and Beijing. I don't have a full schedule for that yet, but that will be announced very soon. That is a Sideman trip. That's in October, middle of October. And then with my band, plus some solo clinics in the UK, first, second week of November, November 4th, doing a masterclass down at Absolute Music in Bournemouth, 3 to 5:30 p.m. Got a masterclass at the Pizza Express November 6th in Soho, 2 to 4:30 p.m. Same night is opening night with the trio, with Cliff and Tom, November 6th, Pizza Express, 8 to 10 p.m. All of these are on sale right now, by the way. Tickets are at my website on the tour page, janekgwizdala.com. Is that /tour? That would make the most sense, right? I don't know. It's at the website. Go click on the tour tab on the top of the page. November 7th, that's back-to-back nights at a Pizza Express Jazz Club in Soho. November 7th will be night 2. Then we get up early and run up to Nottingham, giving another solo masterclass, 3 to 5:30 p.m. at Peggy's Skylight. Same venue, same day, November 8th. We'll also play with the trio. So only 3 shows with the trio and 3 solo clinics for that trip. And then we'll have more stuff coming in 2024 as the album sort of comes out or rather is out and hopefully gains some momentum. October 17th is the release date of the new album. We are deep in the mix process. We have a release schedule for 3 singles. I'm going to be putting 3 singles that we also filmed additional footage specifically for. So they'll be released on YouTube leading up to the October 17th release of the album. And I think they're sort of staggered at 10 days. So it's like October 7th and September 27th and September 17th. I want to say those are the 3 days that the 3 singles are coming out. We are mixing them right now. I'm back and forth with Juan Pablo every day, talking about bass sounds and references and where we want to go and how we want to do it. And I think there are some things that are really different on the album and even just from each other, never mind different from stuff I've done in the past. And some of them involve sequencers and synths and programming, and others are completely like acoustic as you can get with an electric bass. But you know what I mean? So it's a really wide range of stuff that we have to make kind of cohesive. And that is what we are in the middle of right now. It is no easy feat. And it is why the podcast is delayed like a motherfucker. It's why I haven't been on track with that. It's why I haven't been posting to YouTube, not so much on the Substack. It's a lot of work. And you factor in the kiddo and the family and everything else that's going on. It has made me do a lot of thinking in the past couple of weeks, and we shall touch upon that in this episode and just sort of bringing it into focus. Well, some more questions than answers, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I actually like questions and I don't need them all answered. I just sort of like it when they lead to more questions and go further down the rabbit hole of discovery. But unfortunately, in the sense that it's a really massive part of my life and it's not something that's just a hobby or something I can put on the back burner and be like, oh, well, let's see what happens with that. No, it's actually quite serious. And it's serious in terms of how I make a living and how I continue being a musician, being involved in music full time. And when I look at some of the things I'm doing in music right now, some of them don't make me so happy. Some of them don't have the sorts of results that help the cause, shall we say, in terms of really basic terms of just making money and surviving. So I've had to reevaluate some of the things I'm doing in those terms in the past couple of weeks. And while I've been doing it, and probably what this podcast will end up being titled is to do with the sort of musical love letter I just wrote to my wife, to Chelsea. It was our 4th wedding anniversary last week, and the 2 weeks leading up to that, basically the entire time from when I got back from Argentina until our wedding anniversary, I was working on this song. I rearranged the Maroon 5 song "She Will Be Loved," because that's the song we got engaged to 5 years ago this week on stage with James and Adam and the band in Denver. I surprised Chelsea and we went out to see a show. I think we were both busy when the band played in LA. And also just like, it's the worst, no matter whether you're Maroon 5 and you're playing at the Hollywood Bowl or whether you're a jazz trio or something, like playing in New York and LA and London, like a few big cities around the world. It's always rough going as a guest, rougher going as a guest. Even when you're like on the super inner circle and you like very close friends with people, like big cities, record labels and all kinds of other people, like just absolutely crush the guest list and the comp tickets. So it's always more stressful being in that orbit in a major city. So I was actually quite glad we were both busy when the band played in LA. I think it would have been kind of a little hectic, and it meant we got to get out of town. We went to Denver, which we both love. We love being in Colorado, and we got to take a little trip. And it was like, under no circumstances are we getting engaged this weekend. That's what I said to her, because we've been talking about it, obviously, and you know, sort of figured out the ring and done all this stuff. But I was like, yeah, I don't want to get your hopes up. You know, I know that's very romantic, but this weekend, let's just go this weekend. Let's have fun and do our thing and sort of shut off. We've both been working super hard. Let's just go have fun and see our friends and see James, see the band and everyone and hang out in Denver. And James's lady is from there. And so it's just a really nice trip. You know, I think James's brother was in town as well, if I remember rightly. So it was just kind of nice friends hanging out, having lunch, just cruising around. Really cool. Little did she know that I was like frantically like behind the scenes making all these plans and trying to get this thing to happen. And James had suggested it. We were playing tennis like some weeks or maybe even a couple of months before. And he said, well, why don't you just come on stage? Come to a show and come on stage and do it with me and Adam. I was like, okay. So he texted Adam, and Adam's like, yeah, obviously. So I was like, okay, it's on. That all happened in like a few minutes. Like, he suggested it. I was like, okay, that'd be fun. He texted Adam, and then it was a done deal within like 5 minutes. But then like just figuring out how to do it, picking the location. It was a lot of behind the. Actually, the most stressful part was trying to appear not to be stressed and trying to hide everything and like secret the ring. You know, like I'd already had it delivered to a friend. I think I had it delivered to James so that it wouldn't show up at the house. And then he had given it to me, and then I had to walk around with it the whole day, not in a box, because I was just wearing jeans and a shirt or something. As you'll see in the video, it was like, I think it was like September. It wasn't that cold. It was just jeans and a shirt day. So I was walking around with a phone and a wallet and this ring just randomly sitting in my pocket in no case or anything. So there were little stressful things I had to hide. And then, so actually, I don't know how we got here. I was just talking about the engagement and the love letter that I wrote. So yeah, to explain that, we got engaged in the end with James and Adam playing She Will Be Loved. They did it in this, they come down the front of the stage, do this little acoustic thing, and the rest of the band takes a pause, and it's just James and Adam. By the way, this whole thing, I've just posted it. You can see the whole thing, the engagement, and the song I'm about to talk about, because what I ended up doing was getting the video footage from the band's videographer, from Travis, and really nice high quality stuff. You know, he's right in the audience shooting it from below. It was super cool to get that footage from him. I was like, I want to do something cool with this, and I don't just want to like give her the footage. You know, I think I'd actually shown it to her or something maybe a year ago. I've had it for maybe a year. I was like, I want to do something special with it, so I rearranged the tune and reharmonized it, different tempo. I think we was up at 121, like way faster than the record. And I hadn't taken note of James's tempo, his like solo acoustic guitar part from the show, and it ended up being exactly 121 BPM. So that was kind of crazy. So you'll hear where he's playing She Will Be Loved in Denver in 2018 dovetails perfectly into my arrangement that I wrote, 6-7 weeks ago before I went to Argentina. And I'm so overwhelmed by the support of all of our friends. The main focus was to get as many of Chelsea's, like the most important musical friends and family from her life involved. And of course, there could have been 20 more with a project like this. Just finding space for people in the arrangement was a massive challenge, and people's schedules lining up. I'm amazed that we got the people we did. James was kind enough to play some guitar on it. It was a little cringy asking him to cover his own song or play on a cover of his own song, but he was super cool about it. And it was just fun, being in the studio doing a song for a change. Like, just sitting there with him in the studio, like coming up with guitar parts for an arrangement of something that was pretty whacked out compared to the original. So it's always fun making music together. Great to be doing it on something like this. So, but I was so overwhelmed by the support and the willingness of everyone involved, be it family who was kind of contractually obliged, maybe, I don't know, but also amazing music. Her dad's a drummer and a percussionist. He played vibes on it, and her brother's a world-class oboist and English horn player. So I wrote this little arrangement in the intro for him to play, and he tracked that out in Connecticut. Her dad recorded at home. I was in James's studio recording him. I went over to Bob Reynolds' place and got Bob involved. We've both known Bob. Like, Bob and his wife are godparents to our daughter. Like, we're talking about some very close friends as well as close musical friends. And then Amber Navran, who's one of Chelsea's best friends, the singer and saxophone player from the band Moonchild, did these amazing harmonies. And really at the last minute, she was leaving on the road. So it's just an unbelievable, coming together of friends in support of this wonderful woman that I'm proud to call my wife, and in support of the cause of giving her this amazing gift. And there were tears. I played it for her, and it was very successful in terms of that. It was very emotional, and it was touched. It was all the things I wanted it to be for her, like to have that experience and to sort of encapsulate this really important moment in our lives of getting engaged with the video, and then of course celebrating 4 years of marriage, and just the fact that we did that. We went and got married, and we have all these amazing people in our lives. My best friend Antonio played nylon string. Jacob Mann, the ridiculous piano player, keyboard player. You probably heard him with bands like Noah. And if you haven't heard his own band, unbelievable. Go check out Jacob Mann, big band. I'll put links to literally everything I can find from these unbelievable musicians in the description of the video if you're watching on YouTube. Well worth going and listening to what these people can do. My great friend for almost 25 years, Jonah Smith, was gracious enough to sing lead vocals on it. I was going to do it as an instrumental at first. We should probably get into the challenges I've faced, like really doing something like this for the first time on this kind of scale. Like, I've recorded a couple of cover songs before, but with a band and not with 20 people involved. So this was quite a challenge like that. And originally, like I said, it was going to be an instrumental, and I was like, oh man, I'm kind of hearing the vocal now, and I was hearing a male vocal, and let's call Jonah. And amazingly, he knocked it. I called him one day, and within 24 hours, the vocal was done as you hear it. Just amazing. And the fact that it's a video, it's not just a song. I wasn't just asking people to record a part and send me an MP3 or WAV file. I also had to ask them, hey, can you shoot a video? And certain people, can you do it vertical? Certain people, can you do it horizontal? In terms of the video editing, that's a whole other thing to get people not only to play this amazing music, but then to also go back and sort of mime to their part and have this video element. Because that's the thing, that's the presentation that Chelsea saw, that made it so much more impactful. So again, just overwhelmed by everyone's willingness and graciousness to participate. So yeah, we had Amber singing backgrounds. We have my great friend Lizzy Loeb, daughter of Chuck Loeb, who I toured with for many years, also singing BVs. I'm determined not to forget anyone. Of course, Cliff Almond and Tom Cawley, my trio. We tracked the basic rhythm section tracks in Argentina when we were doing my album, and Juan Pablo Alcaro did a quick mix. It was really quick as well. It's by no means a finished song. Like, if I was putting that on an album, we could probably work another 2 weeks on it. And just the way in which people had to do it really quickly and in varying degrees of fidelity in terms of the audio. Some people didn't have access to studios, or it was just not musically, I guess, how I would have done it as a producer if I just had everyone there in the studio. So there were all of these variables which were totally new to me. And then Juan Pablo slapped this kind of crushingly great mix together, considering everything was so sort of rushed and done on a very accelerated timeline. And it just a really fun project at the end of the day. And I think what made it more fun was that it had significant meaning, and that I knew who was going to see it. And initially I was like, I'm going to keep this as a private thing. And I made a little unlisted YouTube video of it and sent it to everyone involved and just say, hey, thanks, I really appreciate this. And hey, and this is how it turned out. And then Chelsea was like, oh my God, you should put this on the record, or you should release this somehow. And I was like, oh, okay, shit. I hadn't thought about that. So the last few days I've been thinking how to do it. And I was like, well, let me tell the story about it. It'll make for an episode of the podcast, which is a little different. It means something, not just personally because that's my wife and those are all our friends, but it means something musically as well. So I can definitely talk about that today and some of the challenges that I faced doing it that were quite interesting, and some things I hadn't considered before that would be an option or an issue or a challenge. And so I ended up, shooting a little intro to it just to give it some context and uploading it at the same time as this podcast. So you can go check out the full thing. You can see what turned into the most epic proposal I could possibly have been a part of. Again, thanks to the unbelievable kindness of James and Adam and those guys for making it happen, and all the other people that you don't know and you don't know as being associated with that band. Like, there are so many beautiful people behind the scenes that are there every minute and every second of every tour, making that happen. And I've opened for those guys before, so I've been around them a lot, like weeks and weeks on end, like dozens of shows on the road, and seeing the machine from the inside, and sometimes the not so glamorous, in fact a lot of the time, the not so glamorous side of it all, and getting to know those people that really make it a well-oiled machine. And I'm not going to name names because those are private people, and it's best that they stay that way, I think, and they like to be private and be behind the scenes, and they're very effective in that sense. But there are a lot of incredibly kind people that surround. I'm sure that there are many people like that in many different camps. I've heard that John Mayer has beautiful people around him. I've heard a lot of great stories from great bands. I just happen to know those guys better than any of those other artists, and I've been around them, so I can speak to that personally from experience. And just it really is amazing the amount of care and detail that those people behind the scenes put into it, and how integral a part of making that proposal happen they were. It wasn't just James and Adam, let's do it. Well, there are other considerations that go into that, as you'll see if you watch it. Adam forgot. We kind of planned it, like exactly where I was walking from and the whole choreography, and I think because it changed like 3 or 4 times in the dressing room right before they went on stage, maybe that's why he forgot where I was coming from. But as you can see, I come from the back of the stage and he's looking out front expecting me to come from the front, and he's like, holy shit, dude, security guard almost fucking killed you coming from back there. So it's a big machine, and there are a lot of eyes and a lot of people in the shadows that you don't really realize are there that help make it safe for everyone, which is cool, and just they make it run super, super smoothly. Some of the challenges, actually some of the things I hadn't considered that much. Like, I knew my brother-in-law was an incredible musician, quite how great, and I've seen him live, and we talk about music, and we know each other now quite some years, but it's when you get up close and personal in a musical sense, and you have an isolated track there where you can hear like the person's soul coming out of their instrument. There's like, as the producer of the song, I have access to all the individual parts, so I can just solo a part and hear every single detail of what's going on. And that really, really knocked me out. And I wish it could have been a bigger feature, the English horn part of it. And I wrote for like 3 English horns and 1 oboe. I think he's primarily an oboist. but plays an unbelievable English horn. And that just made me think a lot, like, whoa, this is a nice option to have. Like, I now know an English horn player who's amazing, who I can hire for things and write for as well. So that made me just yet another thing that I uncovered, and a layer that I peeled back and realized I'm missing out on something by not using that instrument. And I think it's a very underutilized instrument. At least it has been in my orbit. I was about to say I've never written for one. I don't think I have written for English horn before. I've written for oboe very minimally, like maybe 20 bars or something for some woodwind section or something, but never the English horn. Bassoon, bass clarinet, all the saxophones, well, all of them. Tenor, alto, soprano, baritone for sure. But yeah, never the English horn. Really fun. Very very happy we were able to hook that up. And you'll hear, if you check it out, you'll hear it's a beautiful sound. So that's another color in my sort of producer's hat, or my writer's palette, shall we say. That was quite unexpected. And I just knew of, obviously, like, her brother is her brother, an amazing musician. So no brainer, I wanted to include him. And I was sort of scratching my head, like, how am I going to do this? And I was thinking too, like, classical. And he plays saxophones, and he's played music besides classical music a lot in his life. So he has those sensibilities. And I think I was like overthinking, like, how am I going to squeeze this thing in? And I didn't have to squeeze anything in. I just had to write good music and let the amazing musician do his thing. So that was cool. In terms of BVs, working with Lizzy and with Amber, super cool. Two completely different but very beautiful approaches. And it was another thing where I wish I had a day in the studio with each of these musicians, or both of them together, just because you get it when something's rushed like this. You get a little taste of how great they are, and I already know how great they are from many years of knowing Lizzy, and now quite some years of listening to Amber and knowing her as a friend. But when you work on a project like this, you get a glimpse of how specific they can be for a song, and you just want to draw so much more of that out of them and make the most of their talents for the production. So yeah, if I could have a do-over, my one stipulation would be that I would want to spend time with all of those people face to face in the studio, just talking and working on it together, rather than like sending an idea and then getting a thing back and really not having any time for revisions or additions or anything. So it's probably the only thing I'd do differently with this project. And then balancing the keyboards with the acoustic piano we'd already recorded, and Jacob's got an amazing range of sounds and was also super fast. Really got me like 7 or 8 tracks, different ideas. I think I used all but one because it was just getting so thick. I was like, there's no way I have space for synth number 7 on this. But so many of his ideas were super hip. I wanted to use as much as possible. And I said to him, hey man, it's like, I think it might be a fade out at the end. There are like 4 extra choruses of comping. Just rip a solo, go for it, go nuts. And we'll probably fade out, after 8 bars or something. And then I got the solo back. I was like, well, this isn't a fade out. This is going all the way to the very last note, because what he played was fantastic. And then you see me and James fucking around to close out the video. But yeah, very interesting process. My video editing skills not fantastic for this at all. It's not anywhere close to like the Jacob Colliers or the people who basically do that for a living or did that for so long that's what sort of made them and put them on the map. And also I wasn't really going for that either. It was just how to get these people on the screen to show Chelsea. It was really such a personal thing. I think that's what I liked about it, is I wasn't making this for YouTube. Sorry, coffee drinkers and podcast listeners and everyone who follows me and our fans. I really wasn't making this for you guys. And that's not to say that the stuff I make for you isn't special. It just, now I've found out, it just comes with a slightly different context and a slightly different focus, shall we say. And the focus when I make stuff for you guys and when I make stuff for fans, followers, for the public is always about, do I like this? Am I doing this because I truly love it? And as soon as those ideas start to creep in, like, oh, well, maybe if I do this, then the audience will like it more, or, oh, but people, that's the hip thing people are doing right now. As soon as that creeps in, I've lost, and I have to sort of scrap the idea and go back to the beginning. So when I make things for you guys, it's really about making it for me because I love it so much that there's maybe a chance someone else will connect to that sort of willpower and love that has gone into creating it. And with this, it was like, I'm doing this for my wife, and I love her, and this is what I want to say to her. And this, like I said, this is like the love letter. This is what you mean to me. This is how important our lives together are, and this is the best way I can convey that. And maybe this is the most meaningful way I can convey that, really, to one person. So it's very different. I'm intrigued to see what the public response is to it now that I've put it out on YouTube. And I'm sure you guys and girls will chime in and let me know at some point. Not that matters, but it is a curious, like I alluded to earlier on, about not being happy about certain things I'm doing musically and with my career and in my life right now. That is a consideration. Like what happens when I put stuff like that out? And it's not like I'm about to change my career into, oh, I'm just going to go make covers right now. Like, there are plenty of people who do that already. And I can't stand most of them, to be honest. I'm like, Christ, you guys are great musicians. Write a fucking song already. You know, like, do something original, please. Like, what is so scary or hard about that? You know, like, you've got all of this ability, and I hate the word talent, actually, but you've got all of this this musical know-how happening, and you choose basically to exclusively play other people's music. I've never really understood that, so I'm not about to do that, that's for sure. I'm not about to go turn my channel into a cover band, basically. But I also, at the same time, can't deny that it was super fun to do. And there are songs I love. There's no getting away from that. I've spent my entire life listening to music long before I was long before I ever knew what a musician was, or definitely long before I ever wanted to be one. And that's hard to ignore. Because there are so many, like, a song will come on, or I'll create these playlists. I've talked about them before, like these practice sets where it's just songs, pop songs, rock tunes, all kinds of different songs that I'll just put 15 or 20 of them in a playlist and play along to them, having never played them before. So it's like ear training and stamina training and just the ability to play music that I don't normally play. And I love it. It's really good fun. You know, I'm not saying I want to be in a wedding band necessarily and just play top 40 all the time. I don't think that would be, that's not my vibe. I know for some people it's also not their vibe, but it's essential. So I'm not shitting on being in a wedding band. And I know for some people it really is their vibe, which is great that they find that. But you know, even though that's not the thing I want to do all the time, it's something that's hard to ignore, that I'm just a fan of songs. And it was interesting, like, as you'll hear from the harmony, it's not really that conventional. And when I sent the demo to James, he was like, holy shit, those chords. I was like, yeah, I got away from the original narrative by a long way. Like, the GPS broke down and I just kept driving, basically. It's not to the point where it's like atonal and unlistenable. I hope I kept it somewhat like, oh man, this is actually interesting. You know, and I serve the melody. That's how I do these. Whenever I arrange or reharm something, obviously not normally a pop tune, but whenever I do something like that with reharmonization, it's really about serving the melody, or rather reserving the melody. It got the first treatment from James, who wrote the song, and Adam, and I forget if there are any other songwriters on there, but I know it was James and Adam at least. It got the original treatment, and it got the chords, and it made this huge international smash global hit for the last 20 years that maybe Tom Cawley, maybe my piano player, is the only person I've ever met that hadn't heard the song. Like, we're in the studio, and he's like, oh, I don't know this song. I don't really know the band. That's a real jazz musician, ladies and gentlemen. That's someone who's pretty focused on something very different, and that's not a bad thing. And he played it beautifully as well. So, but yeah, it will be interesting if for some reason that video gets significantly more traction or views than other videos of mine. It will be an interesting exercise in restraint to not just go do that again. Very tempting. Like, say it got like, I don't know, well, for me, 100,000 views is fucking unbelievable. So say it got like 100,000 views as a video on my channel, and people were like, oh yeah, man, this is great. Why don't you do more of this? It's a good exercise in restraint to be like, well, that's actually not what I do. This was a thing, and this is why it was a thing for this moment, but that's not really what I do. Even though I maybe could, and like grow the channel beyond recognition and do all those things. So that's sort of what's filtering through my brain right now. Obviously, 8-9 months ago, I was very public about, no, it's longer than this now, November, December, very public about leaving social media, which has been amazing, by the way. I should update you all on that. That's a much different subject for another episode, but I'll do that maybe next week, because it has been an incredible change in my life. But then lots of people, I was hanging out with Juan today. It was his 60th birthday. I was hanging out and shooting the shit, talking bass, playing some basses at his studio, and yeah, it's like he mentioned something about Instagram and this and that. And did you see that? I said, I'm not on social media anymore. I don't see anything. I had no clue what he was talking about. And he was like, oh man, shit, how is that? Like what he was asking me about the experience. So it sort of reminded me just today that that has been a big shift. And I very publicly said that. And I said, well, the place I'm going to be is YouTube. The one place I'm going to put stuff out on, and of course the blog, Substack, to have the connection with the mailing list and like the hardcore fans. And yeah, the channel has grown. It's grown maybe another, I want to say like 12% in 9 months, but that's not really exponential growth. And it's not the sort of growth that turns into ticket sales. It's not the sort of growth on YouTube that turns into the sort of things I want to do, which basically is write, record, and play music. That's it. If I could do those three things and make a living, I've been talking about that more recently, it would be amazing. I don't think it's an option to do that exclusively right now, but it is something I'm rethinking the whole approach to what I do on a daily basis in order to make that a reality, and what I'm willing to sacrifice in the process, and certain things I cannot sacrifice due to commitments and responsibilities and having a family and just having all these other things going on in my life. So it's a kind of a big reshuffling, rebalancing, if only in the brain right now for the past few weeks. Something I feel like I should share, talk to you guys about, let you know what's going on, especially when the podcast, which was religiously coming out every Monday morning for so long, so consistently, just when I look at the mountain of work that it takes to finish the project that I'm truly passionate about, which is the new album, it's the thing that screams the loudest. And when the podcast doesn't scream the loudest, it's the thing that gets pushed back a little bit, and the blog gets pushed back a little bit. And then I was working on this beautiful project for Chelsea, which took up 2 whole weeks of basically non-stop, around-the-clock work to get it done. I was so happy doing it, and it was such a blast. Like I said, it's not a lane I would choose to just sink my life into, making covers, but just the process of writing and recording, mixing, editing, being around other musicians, working on parts, being a producer, arranger, all of those things just made me immensely happy and inspired me to do more, or if not that, of something, and maybe it's like taking my own advice when I think about people who like basically just do covers and have huge channels with millions of subscribers that are devoted to covers. And I think to myself, like, fuck, man, just write a song already, you know, like stop covering whatever it is. There are tons of people out there that do that. Maybe I'm actually screaming at myself like, oh, I love that process of recording and being in the studio with a bunch of people like that, but let's do it with original music. And maybe that's working with singers. Like if vocalists came into mind, like working on this song, I was like, oh, I like singers. Might be one of the few bass players who does. I don't know, but I like songs and I like singers, and I really like being in the studio, crafting and working on songs. And I miss my days of being in New York as a producer. And there was a lot of hip hop and R&B, but there was also a lot of gospel and soul and pop and even rock stuff, you know, writing and crafting and playing songs. I miss that a lot. It'd be nice to I know that brought me a lot of happiness back then. It'd be nice to bring some aspect of that back into my life now. And hopefully that will be impactful enough of a story and compelling enough as a product, or I don't know, as a piece of art, continually sort of growing library of music for people to follow the story and follow the journey. So far so good with the new album. It's you know, people are coming along for the ride. Of course, the pre-sale is still going on. It's linked below. Had some interesting comments about that on recent videos. I sort of did a video on the main channel sort of running down the ins and outs of it, and got a few disgruntled, I guess, non-customers if they thought it was too expensive, but the price point of $25 for the pre-sale of the album. And, you know, wishing that there was I think the comment was an everyman price or something of $10. I'm like, well, at some point you have to draw the line. At some point you have to value your art, and at some point you have to value yourself. And I think when you undervalue yourself, and this isn't even from like, this is not a marketing ploy, but when you undervalue yourself, the perception of what you do becomes weaker as well. And when you put an appropriate, what I consider to be an appropriate value to what I'm doing, I know it's not for everyone, and I don't pretend that it ever will be. But I'm also not trying to please everyone either. And I am trying to sleep at night and be okay with the price I put on my product, my art. And so far so good. We're sort of 99-point-something% positive feedback, which is amazing from you guys. And I've said it before, I will say it again, and I will continue to do this every time I do a project. I am so happy I gave myself more time after the initial tracking process in the studio with the trio to do all the other pieces. Like, it's to the point, like, the album is going to come out October 17th, and we have given ourselves a serious amount of time to mix it. And I think it is going to reflect that in the product. I think it's going to sound better than any of my records before, just because we took the time, you know. And then with the documentary, I'm even thinking about pushing that back a month after the release of the album, because I would really like to include something about the live shows with the same band that was in the studio. I think that would be sort of compelling, a more compelling arc to the story, to see, you know, Tom and Cliff meeting for the first time ever, first of all, let alone playing for the first time, and us all playing together as a trio in the studio on the one gig we played in South America, and then making the album coming out, you guys having a chance to check it out, and then having this element of us going to Europe and playing a few shows together as a band. It kind of feels like a better arc, and like I might get a better quality narrative out of it. Especially if, like, I have something pictured in my mind of where I want to film a master shot, just a single shot, maybe with multiple cameras, but just me in a room, sort of being interviewed to create the narrative for the documentary, which would mean having experienced all the things. And so I can't edit it and get it ready now because I haven't experienced the next 6 to 8 weeks of stuff that's going to happen with this music. So last time, I think I put the documentary and the album out at exactly the same time. This time, I think I might stagger it by 4 weeks maybe, because we're going to be done by the 8th of November, so I could get my last footage and then get that in the edit and give myself like 10 days, 10, 12 days, so sort of middle of November to put the documentary out. So it's all little things like that, little details about not being pressured by, I have to have it out on this date. Everything must happen together. Like, I've promised all these people all these things. Yeah, I have. I've promised you guys, everyone on the pre-sale, a bunch of things, and all the things I promised will come out on that day. But the documentary, I think, may benefit from a few weeks delay in order to pick up a little more in the narrative and just be a better watch for you guys, and more compelling, and something you might consider sharing with other people. And I'll close with this, actually. I probably should have opened with it. I'll close with this for today. Maybe you can give me your feedback and we'll talk more about it in the future. I was just thinking about this podcast channel on YouTube, for instance, has, 13 or 1,400 subscribers. Not an insignificant number of people. If that many people showed up at my house, I'd be, what the fuck is going on here? It'd be insane, right? If 30 people showed up at my house, if 1,400 people showed up at a gig, it would be the best attended gig I'd ever played as an artist. So it's not an insignificant number of people. Yes, it's diluted because everyone's all over the world, and all of you kind folk of the bass world are not listening from one place or about to come to a show in one place. But I was thinking about, I get way more joy out of the long form stuff and making the podcast and stuff like that, rather than the 10 to 15 minute video that takes a week or 10 days to produce, and sound effects and sound design and soundtrack and scripting and B-roll and all of this other stuff, which is kind of crazy on the main channel. I was actually thinking, what if the podcast channel sort of overtook everything else? And how could we do that? How could we get it? Because this 1,400 people, 1,300 people, whatever it is that are subscribed to this channel on YouTube is not an insignificant amount, but it's a tiny fraction of the bass community, right? And of people that may be interested in listening to some of the things I have to talk about when I'm doing the shows on my own. And in the future, by growing the channel, maybe it's possible to have someone else as a co-host. Not necessarily just do one-off interviews with people, but have someone maybe in LA. Maybe it's someone like a Tim LaFave or a Chris Cheney, someone great, someone interesting that could be a co-host on the podcast. I don't know. These are things that are ideas that are jumping around my head, but how to facilitate that. And I was thinking, okay, there's some like standard math thing that if, before I even say this, I know this is not going to happen, and B, is kind of impossible, but some version of it, even a much smaller version of this, would definitely help that, and would help me be able to create a much better podcast, more compelling, bring you guys tons more information in a higher quality package, I think. And just help the overall thing of, I'm not necessarily looking to turn the podcast into a source of any significant income, but when it helps sell concert tickets and raise awareness to projects that are going on that are making money in other places, I think that's a huge thing. That's what all the comedians do. Even though a lot of the comedians are making $50,000 in an ad read, some of these huge podcasts, Rogan is out of control with hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank as a result of a podcast. This is not that. But what all of those podcasts do in the comedy world is they sell tickets. They sell tickets to shows, and they make it possible for each of those comedians to continue leaving the house and going to do what they love and entertaining audiences. So on some small level, I would like the podcast to really be that for the live performance and for the recording side of my life. And to that end, if everyone listens, say this podcast gets 1,000 views, say 1,000 people listen to this or watch this podcast on YouTube when it comes out, which is not unreasonable. The podcast gets, okay, last week, the Watch episode, total flop, was the worst performing episode in the history of the podcast, perhaps. Just nobody wanted to know about watches. I totally overestimated the amount of people that had actually reached out and said, hey, do a watch podcast. But anyway, I did one episode. There it is. Super fun to do. But let's say 1,000 people in the first week listen to this episode. If every one of those 1,000 people, every one of you listening right now, forwarded this to a friend another bass player, don't spam anyone. Like someone who you think will legitimately get something out of it, not this episode, but any episode of the podcast. If you could forward that to one person, that. Of course, I know that number is never going to happen at 100%, but it would significantly increase the reach of what I'm trying to do here, and that'd be pretty huge. And if we could continue like that, it's something like, what is it? It's only like 10 weeks or something before you hit, like, again, I'm realistic about it. It's never going to be 1 million subscribers, but if that happened every week at 100%, it would only be a very short time, it seems, before it hit like 1 million subscribers. I'm not looking for 1 million. Just looking to expand, I think, into the heart of the bass community at the end of the day, and people who are, of course, other aspects of the music industry as well. I'm not just playing for bass players, but why not start in the bass niche, as that's what I'm known for. And it would start opening some doors, I think, in terms of being able to book shows on my own, maybe without the need for promoters and clubs, and just bring this thing that I do out into the world and do it for real, in real life. IRL, as the kids say. Because that's basically all I want to do, and that's what makes me the most happy. So on that note, give it a go. If you think there's one person you know, if there's more than one person, amazing. Don't spam them, please. But if you think there's one person that you could send an episode of this podcast to that you think, I think they'd get something out of this, and encourage them to subscribe, that would be huge. Again, I'm not asking for money. I'm not trying to turn this into some significant source of income, but turning it into a platform on which to, with which to connect with people who generally would dig being out there at a show. Pretty cool if we can make that happen. All right, that's it. More album updates. The single will, before I know it, the first single will be coming out. So I got to be back to work on that. It's literally as soon as I press stop on the camera right now. And appreciate you listening this far. Pre-sale is below, as are all the links to the tour dates. All of the shows and clinics also are on sale right now, linked in the description of this video or in the show notes, wherever you're listening to the podcast. Appreciate you being around. Love you guys. See you next time.